Chasing the Signal. Written by J Fitzpatrick Mauldin. Narrated by J.D. Ledford. Present. Mission Year 12. Bellamy Baptista glared as the spherical glass tank filled with water like a giant fishbowl. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong, unnatural, that trusting herself to be submerged into the Foundry's machine was more than foolish. But what choice did she have? Their choices had been taken away when the Foundry's outer defenses disabled their ship. Living nightmares had taken their place. Granddad had said to her in his final moments to be tough in the days ahead, that everything would be okay in the end. Her mom had said not to listen to his lies. All he ever does is lie, even when he's acting kind. After their ship, the Revelation, had been torn apart, the remainder of the human crew murdered or eaten alive, trust in the unknown was all Bellamy had. She was alone, sickened by her mother's poisonous words. And it was for this deathbed slander that the last thing she said to her mother before the resurrection bath came to life and her eyes closed were, "I hate you." The bath flashed with brilliant white light, and her mother's soul was no longer aboard the Foundry, beginning a journey along a narrow path Bellamy could not follow. The resurrection bath faded to black, and her mother's limp body was swept away to be recycled. A display on the side of the bath began counting down from 9,456. It would be 10 years before it could be used again, or so the great and powerful Foundry told her. If she wanted to follow, she would have to use more conventional means. Bellamy put her face to the frigid deck and wept. The Foundry did not understand her tears, but it tried to accommodate. It kept her safe from the offending race of Isoptera. It provided for her basic needs. It formulated plans for her to get what she desired. The Foundry designed and crafted for her a spaceship. Pressure tank at 50% capacity. A calm voice reported over the intercom. Bellamy swallowed and wiped her eyes. She was back in the present, within the ship the Foundry had made for her. The computer's voice sounded too much like her mother's for comfort. If it were in her power to change this option, she would. She couldn't let herself get too comfortable within the belly of an alien beast. "Why did you do this for me?" she asked aloud and dangled her legs over the lip of the sphere's opening at the top. The warmth of the approaching water increased. A continuous whir of pumps carried on, a din of frightfully advanced and unknowable machinery enveloping her. It worked. That was all she needed to know. She distracted herself in the moment by carefully re-inspecting the 12-inch gold disc in her fingers. It was a choice in waiting, but she needed an answer first. A furry mammal scurried up beside her. It picked at its front claws with its teeth for a moment, then licked its paws clean. Vulpine ears of wispy calico hair twitched and pivoted. It paused and regarded her with sunken rodential eyes set upon a feline face. It was impossible to read the creature's intentions, regardless of the context. Though it almost seemed domestic, many things about it did not add up. It had the body of a stocky, medium-sized dog, moved and acted gracefully like a cat, yet looked at the dark, cold universe like a rodent seeking a means to survive. The Foundry referred to it as Proxy. Unlike other lower mammals, Proxy was far more intelligent and clever than Bellamy would ever hope to be. And not because he wished so or had studied all his life. Proxy had a direct neural link to the world-encompassing structure the human ship had traveled far to discover. The Foundry. Though it was great, The alien structure was but a single node in a galaxy-spanning network of ship-constructing machines, built by a species of vast power and immortal influence. The mammal before her was merely one of their mouthpieces, something she could relate to. "Why did you do this?" Bellamy murmured. Proxy rose onto two legs, placing his front paws at the small of his back to imitate human behavior. Bellamy found that on occasion he even pursed his lips and tapped a claw against them, as she might when thinking hard. It made her squirm at how familiar it all was.
"Why? I thought it obvious. Because I care for you,"
Proxy said, his measured baritone voice resonating in her chest. He met her eyes.
"Bellamy Baptista of Atlanta, Georgia. I care for you and your well-being."
The tank burbled as a series of bubbles broke the rising surface of water. The tone of the fluid pumps changed. Bellamy knew the time was drawing near. It was like a rock in her stomach. "I don't believe that." She licked her lips and tasted bitter salt. "Your signal led us here only for the revelation to be disabled as soon as we came within range. You allowed us to be boarded by those bloodthirsty termites. Everyone died." She paused as if to catch her breath, exhausted. "Yeah, we took them out with us. But where did that leave me? With a mom and granddad at death's door. 50 others with us, dead. There had to be more of a purpose than this."
"Ah, yes. The Isopteran invaders. They are aggressive ones. Some of the worst we've seen, but your grandfather was clever. He burned a line clear through their interdictor's hull with the Revelation's overloading torch drive. Clever. Clever for a craft with no weapons to destroy such an advanced machine of war."
"Whatever." She furrowed her brows and hung her head. The gold disc gleamed in her fingers, its metal soft to the touch. All she would need to do is drop it in the rising waters and the data would be useless. So easy. Yet so heavy on her mind. It was not easy to let go. "You had the power to change the situation, and yet you did nothing," she said. "None of it needed to happen. You speak of it like it was Granddad's greatest victory, an academic discussion. We came in peace and made that clear from almost a light year off. We came to understand more of the universe, to learn. You opened us up for a devastating attack." Proxy sighed and curled up beside her, first turning in circles a half-dozen times, like a pet seeking its perfect spot beside the hearth. He purred like an idle motor.
"Your grandfather had a choice, just as your mother did."
"And he made it," Bellamy growled with a little too much venom.
"So he did."
"It's just hard. I'm not sure how to feel other than alone."
"I know."
Proxy let out a long breath and rolled into her.
"And that's part of why we're making up for it. We have constructed you a new ship to replace the old, a better ship. It is what we do. We build ships, and custom, I might add. So many species out there. So many environments to take into consideration."
Bellamy put a hand on his back and began to stroke him from neck to tail. The purring grew more vigorous. It made her feel safer, not quite so alone. Proxy was almost Earth-like, almost a friend or a pet. She wasn't sure what he was to her, or even the Foundry. "But can you construct replacements of my friends and family?" The water was nearly licking her toes, errant splashes kissing the tips of her flesh like a gaggle of restless fairies. Can you bring them all back?
No, we can't bring them back. I'm sorry. But you still have a choice in the matter. There is a life open to you. Two, in fact. Not all are gone.
I know, she said, and looked at her reflection on the surface of the disk. 2 deep scars ran the length from her forehead to her upper lip. Ever since the attack, the muscles of her face had a hard time forming a smile on one end, as if she'd suffered a stroke. All told, she counted herself lucky. 1 chitinous slash, a rent torn in her flesh, but she survived.
We can speak of it more if you like.
Proxy persisted.
We can make a plan, weigh the...
She cut him off. Not now.
Okay,
he said, sounding wounded. The purring ceased, and he got up, letting Bellamy's hand fall limp to the deck. Water enveloped her feet. It was warm, but not hot, well within the Goldilocks zone for human comfort. What does it do? The sphere. The water. You haven't told me. Proxy glanced over his shoulder on his way out of the room. He waited for a moment, collecting his words, and then turned around.
It will keep you alive for as long as you need to be. Mammals don't handle forces of gravity higher than the planets they were born of well. From this sphere, you will be safe from extensive G-forces. You will have the ability to pilot this ship as if it were your own body. You will have the ability to slow or speed your metabolic rate and frame of subjective time to almost anything you wish. For you, a breath may be 2 full solar cycles or a lifetime trapped in a moment. Time is subjective. Based on our perception, 10 light years may fall away in a single spark of your synapse, if you wish. It isn't hard. We call this device a star sphere. It is where the pilot exists, where the pilot is protected within the center of the ship.
Star sphere, she whispered with a touch of reverence. And how far away do you think the location on this disk is? She held it over the water for him to see. 10 light years?
Much closer than that.
Okay. She took a long breath. Okay. Her fingers spread wide and the disk fell into the water. Within an instant it had dissolved, along with its irreplaceable information.
Ah, not real gold, I see.
Proxy was curious.
Aren't we a little sly one? Mind telling what it was made of?
I'll let you take a guess, Bellamy said. Figure it out on your own. She slipped over the edge of the deck and into the bubbling sphere of water. In a flash, her body was completely submerged, her hair floating towards the surface like an undulating mass of pale seaweed. The opening above her irised shut, reducing the light to a fraction of what it was. There was no going back now. Good or bad, the choice was made. She curled into a ball and surrendered herself to the Foundry's design, holding to the hope of her granddad's words. Umbilicals snaked from tiny holes on all sides of the sphere, securing her face and body at the gravitational center of the ship. These would be her lifelines. All nutrition, oxygen, waste removal, her very perception, would come through these arteries. Pressure returned to her lungs, and she breathed deep, heart thundering in her chest, washing her in relief. She closed her eyes and let the ship's data ports burrow into her spine like dental drills mounted to the end of metallic tentacles. They stung only a little. She told herself again and again, until it was true. She squeezed her eyes tight, and the bubbles flowed from her mouth. A stream of agony and regret released the instant they broke the surface. The pain subsided. A calm returned to her mind. Her eyes creaked open to see a new world. It was all so clear. The universe around her throbbed with cosmic waves of elemental energy, invisible and powerful. Bands of photons, alpha waves, beta, gamma, and X-rays bound for places and purposes unknown became brilliant segmented bands of neon light in her mind's eye. She giggled as countless neutrinos passed through her belly, escaping the fusing stars that gave them birth so long ago. She gasped as supernovae crackled at the peripheries, the shock of their explosions reaching her ears, making the hairs within stand in awed attention. In that moment, she became aware of something wonderful and beautiful that would never be forgotten. The great black was far more alive than she had ever suspected. There were forces at play beyond anyone's grasp that one could only hope to make use of and not fight against. One only needed the right perspective to understand that truth. Use the current, redirect its force to your will. Do not fight entropy, or you will be unmade. I see the signal, she marveled, realizing she was no longer submerged in water. She was someplace else, suspended in a field of diamond stars dappled with rainbow nebulae, a virtual construct in which she could move as freely as she wished. She touched her face, feeling for the scar the Isoptera had left, but there was nothing. No training was necessary for what came next. She was the ship. The ship was her. The connections within the star sphere made this craft a new body, an extension of her will.
Yes, the signal,
Proxy replied from out of sight.
Go to her, Baptista. This is the choice you have made. Don't run now.
I'm coming, Mom. Hold on. Bellamy broke free of the Foundry's deck, and all hell broke loose. 1 year before mission.
Can I show you something neat?
Granddad said in his raspy Midwest meets Southern voice, a silver spoon waggling in his hand. 10-year-old Bellamy nodded, her heart filling with an apprehensive curiosity. Uh-huh. Yeah. Show me. He smiled and slid a glass of water across the stained dining room table, weaving it through crumpled fast food sacks and spent soda cans to a spot in front of her.
What do you think will happen when I stir this glass of water with this spoon?
She crossed her arms and humphed. Are you playing a joke on me, Granddad? Is this a trick question? His hands went up in mock defense.
No, not at all. Not at all. What do you think will happen?
The water will spin around. He winked and started stirring.
Magic, come to me. Make this spoon unravel. Take it one part and the next till dissolved and gone we wallow. Presto!
Starting at the base of the spoon, the metal dissolved till there was nothing left but clear liquid. Bellamy's mouth fell open. But how? Are you magic?
Sure, I've got magic in me.
It's a trick, Bellamy's mom said, entering the room with a basket of clean laundry piled high on her hip. It's gallium, Belle. It has a low melting point. The water's tepid at best. Hell, I'm surprised it didn't melt in his hands.
Magic!
Granddad waved his fingers and Bellamy chuckled. He always had a way of making her laugh. Bellamy's mom muttered something under her breath as she folded clothes.
What was that, Grace Anabaptista?
Nothing, Paul.
I'm hungry as a horse.
Pizza will be here soon enough. Would have cooked dinner like a mom, but hey, I'm working 60 hours a week to support this family. Been a little busy doing grunt work at the lab.
She doesn't go to the lab,
Granddad told Bellamy in a whisper.
She drives a taxi service on her phone.
If you're going to live under my roof, Bellamy's mother's voice rose, all I ask is that you don't lie to my daughter. Come on, Mom. He was just joking.
Stay the hell out of this, Belle.
She closed her mouth and swallowed, eyes gazing down.
Now, don't take it out on her,
Granddad said, raising a finger.
That ain't fair.
Neither's what you did to Mom for all those years, but you did it anyways. And now she's gone.
But I didn't.
You don't think the way you treated her all those years had something to do with it? Grace violently pushed the coffee table aside, and a day-old mug of Joe went tumbling onto the carpet. She made no effort to clean it up. I'll never forgive you for that. Granddad hung his head and sucked on his teeth.
We all make...
Cut the shit, Paul!
The name's Dad. D-A-D. Remember? You used to call me that.
I'll never call you Dad again. Not ever again. Grace glanced at the stain on the floor. And you know, to make matters worse, not only have times been hard for us, but now I'm having to take care of you. The program's shut down, and now you're too old to get a job. Your retirement fund tanked like a rock, and Social Security is nothing more than a stream of piss these days. I have a damned PhD! And I can't even get work because we have to stay here. She waved her arms around at the mess. Close to your doctors. 2 jobs I've turned down. 2. I hope you know what that means. Bellamy began picking at her nails beneath the table. She wanted to run for her room and hide, bury herself in the internet, but her mother was in the way. Their cat, Socks, rubbed up against her leg, but vanished as soon as Bellamy attempted to pick her up.
Well, Grace, that's what I want to talk to you about.
Granddad reached for Bellamy's hand. She took it and squeezed.
I have an opportunity for us. A way to turn things around.
Oh, really? Bellamy's mom rubbed her face and let out a breath. Might as well hear a few more lies from you. I've got 10 minutes. Let's stretch reality a little more. Maybe it'll break and do us all a favor. Granddad produced an impressive sheet of paper and slid it across the table. Grace snatched it up and read it from top to bottom. She glanced at her father and back to the paper. She read it again. Granddad gestured with an open hand.
I've been given the opportunity to join an expedition into interstellar space. As you know, these opportunities don't come along often. Might be the last adventure I ever go on, and I'm not young, you know. Sorry, Squirt.
He winked at Bellamy.
85 may be the new 60, but living here, I won't make it another 30 years before I'm pushing daisies across town. What I can do, however, is make sure my daughter and granddaughter have a good life. Look at the bonus on the bottom line. That's more than I've made in my entire life as a working man in aerospace. 7 figures.
Grace put a hand to her mouth.
But I know. You'd never see me again if I go. You'd hear of my passing decades after it happens. Watching me go will be like watching me commit suicide. Look, I've thought about it long and hard. Even been on my knees more than usual. I'm going. The papers are signed.
All the anger evaporated from Grace's demeanor. Oh, Dad. Bellamy imagined her granddad suiting up and walking the gangplank to an awaiting rocket. the vapor of cryogenic relief valves obscuring his final wave goodbye. The thought made her far sadder than when her own father said she was too much trouble for him to deal with. The engines of the rocket fired, and Granddad roared his way into the heavens, never again to be heard from, only in her heart.
But there is one more thing.
He leaned close to Bellamy and grinned.
You could both come with me. I've already cleared it. They need folk other than salty old mechanics. Maybe even a second generation for the return trip. And that takes young'uns.
Bellamy's eyes went wide. With you? Into space? I'm 10. I have homework due tomorrow. Mom, do 10-year-olds go into space?
No.
Grace waved her hands.
No damn way. Greg would never approve this. I'm not taking that kind of flack. That deadbeat sperm donor.
Granddad laughed.
Yeah, okay. Let the court try and stop us when we're accelerating from Sol at 1/4 light speed.
Bellamy looked around at their aging craftsman home. She heard an airplane roar overhead as it glided down for landing. She could smell the cat's litter box and didn't look forward to going to school on Monday with bits of clay in her worn-out shoes. Kids from over the tracks knew what kind of life she lived, and they made sure to remind her on a daily basis. She was scrappy, but she was small, an easy target. I want to go, she said, facing her mother. I want to be part of history. Her mother crossed her arms. But what about her education? Is it safe?
Safer than living here. You'd be paid as well. As for her education, those who don't work have to study. It's a rule. By the time we reach the alien signal, Squirt will be out of high school, college, and well into graduate studies.
Study? Bellamy stuck a finger into her mouth and made a gagging noise. Ugh, but maybe I can learn to like it. Do you know what you're saying, Belle? Her mom put a hand on her shoulder. This letter says this is a 5-light-year journey. Taking into account for time dilation, we won't be back here on Earth until your friends are elderly. You'll be in your late 30s. I don't care. The child turned to face her granddad. I want to go. You guys are my family and my friends. I want to be with you. Granddad winked and squeezed her hand.
That's my girl.
Present. Bellamy spread her arms and banked around the Foundry's golden ring, a stream of superheated plasma roaring from her tail. She flinched, half expecting to be painted with energy beams as soon as she was free of the first series of the Foundry spokes. But as the Isoptera's ships powered their guns and locked onto her, their weapons shut down. Her body rocked and her engines sputtered. 2 additional Isopteran interdictors were closing on her rear, emerging from docking ports in the geodesic barnacles that lined the Foundry's inner edge. A barrage of chemically powered ballistic weapons ripped through open space and pelted her back in tight lines. She felt pain on her skin, a realization that the ship, had taken damage, but it wasn't severe, not yet. Her connection to the ship from within the star sphere made distinction between her conveyance and her own self blurry. She was the ship, and so all systems reported to her, just as did the nerves of her body. She prayed the Isoptera's other weapons wouldn't come back online, or soon she might feel nothing but oblivion.
How are they doing this?
Proxy asked, his voice alarmed.
Those are the ships we made for them. The Foundry spent a great deal of resources to make the Isopteran fleet. Now they risk it by engaging you so close. Their weapons should not work at all this near.
I don't understand. Proxy appeared and disappeared over the neural link within her visual space. Wherever his physical form was within the ship, he was not properly secured. The pain across her back increased tenfold, turning white-hot where projectiles pierced the first layer of skin. Bellamy dove for the upper cloud layer of the Foundry's swirling gas giant. She knew that the extreme atmospheric conditions and intense electromagnetic fields would make her a hard target. She couldn't allow herself to fail, couldn't allow herself to let the termites' ships take her down. "How can they not do this?" she asked Proxy. "They're in starships. If they have weapons, they can fire at us."
"Not near the Foundry. Don't you see, Baptista? That is why we disabled your ship. That is why we disable all foreign ships. The Isoptera have found a way around the inhibition field."
Vacuum was steadily replaced by thickening clouds of hydrogen and helium, pressure increasing by hundreds of kilopascals per second. Bellamy felt the pressure on her skin like a heavy blanket. But within moments she was fast approaching a weight as great as the Mariana Trench, a crushing press of toxic gas nearly 1,000 times denser than Earth's atmosphere. "Disable all inferior ships?" she asked and checked her rear.
"The builders of the Foundry decided long ago it is safer to replace incoming ships with technology we understand through and through. We know our enemy in any conflict. It has kept us safe for ages."
"But we had no weapons at all."
"Irrelevant. That torch drive of yours could easily atomize a large section of the ring, and it would have taken years to repair it. Besides, our computers are aboard every ship we create. A piece of the Foundry is with you, with them, here to keep things under control. They cannot attack anything the builders have wrought."
Bellamy banked as one of the interdictors skimmed overhead. It had lost her tail, searching for her among the twisting umber eddies of hydrogen that shot skyward as high as cities. "Then stop them," she said. "Tell their ships to cease firing. There has to be a way to override."
"Not part of the rules. They are only made not to fire at the builders' structures. You must get out of this situation on your own. This is no different than if you had come upon them in open space."
A network firewall fell away, and she became aware of what was at her disposal. She wasn't helpless. The ship had a vast array of armaments, some of which she could hardly begin to understand. She reached for her weapons like a brace of pistols hanging from holsters at her belt. The probing interdictor returned to view and opened fire. She rolled onto her back, and her ship followed in flawless synchronization, letting loose a series of antimatter slugs in the enemy's direction. The atmosphere around the enemy vessel ignited, vaporizing the craft. As the shock wave raced to catch her, she soared toward space, fire licking at her heels.
"Bad idea, Baptista. Bad idea."
The superheated scar spread for thousands of kilometers across the gas giant's equator before it finally terminated beside a great storm.
"Oh, thank creation."
You seem relieved, Proxy." Bellamy let out a laugh as she ramped the antimatter drives up and followed after the glowing ribbon of her mother's signal. The Foundry fell away, along with the Isoptera and their fleet. There was no more hiding from the real enemy. They would come. "You okay back there?" A moment passed, and Proxy didn't respond. Bellamy worried she'd pushed herself. The ship. Too far, too fast. How fragile was he? "Proxy? Proxy? Are you there? Proxy!" A gasp filtered into the line.
"I'm here. I had to reach my own sphere, of a sort. I am not the pilot of this ship. You have a desire for speed. I'd rather not die in the process of seeing how far that reaches."
She let out a long breath. "Fair enough."
"How fast are we accelerating, Bellamy?"
30 Gs?
In a hurry, no doubt. Those termites will have a hard time beating you to Foundry 447. Their ships may not be equipped for speed, but I promise they will not give up."
"I know." Bellamy adjusted her trajectory and fixed on a distant star. At this rate of acceleration, she would reach 99% of light speed within a month, while not expending hardly any of the ship's reaction mass. Being bonded to the ship's systems through a sphere made piloting a breeze, easy as breathing. Empty space rushed past her. A freedom of escape filled her. A thought formed. "Proxy?"
"Yes?"
"Does anyone just run away? You know, leave their problems behind. Take their ship from the builders and go."
"What do you mean?"
"The ship. It has a near-perfect means of recycling waste into nutrients. The reaction mass at its core would last me for hundreds of years at full burn, and yet I have the capability of creating more antimatter in a subjectively short stop. The star sphere can extend my life indefinitely. I can pick any place I want, any system, and just go. Time would slip past me in a dilated tunnel. What if I never came back? What if I went from star to star for all time in a grand wanderlust measured only by the galactic turns and flashing supernovae, experiencing the life and death of the universe in snippets of blinding conciseness?" Proxy appeared within her virtual environment. He swam his way through the open air, paddling like a dog in deep water, and found a place beside her.
"Yes, there are a few who have fled everything. We see them from time to time. They are like ghosts, wandering specters."
"Will they ever stop running?" She crossed her legs and reached out, setting him onto her lap. He began to purr against her legs. She squeezed him tight and scratched his ears.
"I don't know," he whispered. "But there is one thing I do know."
"What's that, Proxy?"
"That they will always be alone. That even if someone catches up to them, there's nothing left but the fear of pain within. They have let themselves go, unable to face the flaws in others, and erected walls that cannot be breached. Their hearts have no room for forgiveness."
"But I've always been alone." Proxy nuzzled closer.
"I find that hard to believe."
The day of attack, mission year 11.
"They're coming for us,"
Granddad said.
"That flimsy door won't last much longer."
The Isoptera banged against the airlock of the Revelation. The ship Bellamy and her family had traveled 5 long years aboard to reach the Foundry. 2 days earlier, most of their systems had been taken offline by an energy pulse sent by the Mammoth planet-spinning station. When the termites boarded them, they'd been in freefall toward the gas giant, unable to slow. The Revelation was not a vessel of war, but exploration. Security on board was little more than a crew of bouncers that kept drunks from making too much trouble late at night. They weren't prepared for armored, insectile combatants with energy weapons and the coordination of a hive mind. "We have to help them!" Bellamy's mother cried as she cycled through the ship's cameras. "They're killing them! We have to make it stop!"
"There's no way. No time."
Granddad went to a computer console and started working.
"I have an idea."
Bellamy squeezed up against the wall and clutched an arm-length aluminum pipe for comfort. The banging of feet against the door did not cease. Her mother saw she was on the verge of tears and rushed to hold her. "Is this how it ends?" Bellamy asked her mom. "I don't know. I'm scared." Grace nodded and rubbed her back.
"I've got control of the thrusters,"
Granddad said,
turning the drive to face their ship.
Bellamy's mom shot to her feet. "What are you doing?"
"What I have to."
"But the fusion containment is breached. If you fire up the torch drive..."
"Yes, I know. I'll irradiate everything on the ship but for those in this room. It's shielded, termites and all.
You can't! There are still survivors out there!
Not for long.
Grace struggled against her father. Granddad pushed her to the floor and raised a hand as if to strike her. She cowered and slid away. The frightened look on her mother's face reminded Bellamy of her grandmother.
I won't stand by and let my family die.
Granddad pressed a button and the ship began to vibrate. The Isoptera screeched as one. Present. Cruising at a steady speed, Bellamy had time to reflect. With time dilation, it would take her 3 months to cross the distance to Foundry 447 within her frame of reference. She wasn't sure what she'd discover when she reached there. Would the Isoptera be waiting? Had they already killed her resurrected mother? From a normal reference, a little over 5 years will have passed when she hit the edge of the system. It was an eternity for a wayward soul, but she had come as fast as she could. Bellamy flicked the fingers of her left hand. Her metabolic rate and synaptic activity increased, and subjective time slowed to a crawl. Within a single second, she enjoyed a hot cup of coffee, complete with cream and sugar, feet propped up on the coffee table of her childhood home. Proxy curled up beside her and took a nap. It was all a lie. She knew none of it was real, that the space she was master of was virtual, made of nothing but synaptic suggestion along her cerebral cortex. Still, it made her feel better. Right now, that was what she needed. She made another gesture and reversed the process, days going by in minutes. At this rate, she would reach her destination in a little over 8 hours of subjective time. "Proxy?" she asked. He stirred on the couch beside her, let out a yawn, and rolled over, revealing his pale belly.
Yes, Belle.
"Do you believe there are bad people?" She scratched him down the middle.
People who are inherently bad? No, I don't.
And why is that?
What makes a person bad? Is it in their genetic code? I don't think so. Is it in their brain? Perhaps in some cases. But more often than not, it is in their conditioning. Their actions are merely the result of stimuli.
So you're saying they can do anything they want without consequences? It's not their fault, it's nature.
Hardly. There are always consequences. For every action.
He let the statement hang.
But do not be so quick to judge. The builders who made me and the foundries and so much more have lived for millions of years. Do you not think they've made grave mistakes that have hurt others in their time? Everyone has the capacity to be terrible, even you, as kind-hearted as you are. We are not terrible people, but we can do terrible things.
Bellamy sighed. He killed all those people. How can I let that go? And he used to... Oh, Grandma, how did you do it?
Your granddad gave the crew of your ship a swift death and saved you and your mother's life. He weighed the options and put his family first.
But what if they'd had a chance? Would he have done the same? Just to be sure. Proxy didn't respond. He turned away and cleaned himself. Why was Granddad the way he was? Her friend finished his bath and looked up, his eyes unreadable as liquid ink.
Many reasons. And he was responsible in the end. But if he had born in a different time, had different opportunities, a different culture, different friends, he might not have done those things at all. Perhaps he was sick, had a treatable mental disorder. We can all be demons when the conditions are right.
She nodded, thinking back to the interdictors she had reduced to atoms. How many of their lives had she ended? Was it any different? Isoptera, human, all living beings. Yes, but that was for protection. She had no ill will. A chirp sounded from the old flat-screen TV mounted on the wood panel walls. What was that sound?
You have a priority message from Foundry 447.
Bellamy shifted their environment back to that of the star sphere, her nostalgic fantasy dissolving until it was no more than a wisp of emotion. Oh no, Isoptera are already at the Foundry. They were there before we even left. Mom's in danger.
In danger?
Proxy reviewed the message and shook his head.
Not quite. The Foundry is a massive place, and she arrived by signal in the resurrection chambers. It will take them weeks to figure out that she's even there. Possibly months before they find the location of the resurrection baths. The main concentration of their forces is in the shipyard, nearly a quarter turn around the ring. That's close to 80,000 kilometers away from your mother.
How will we get past them? They'll see me by my drive flame as I slow down. I'll be swarmed before I have a chance. Proxy closed his eyes for a moment, lids twitching as he fell into deep thought. She'd seen this mode before. He was interfacing with the network on a fully immersive level. She held her breath, waiting on his response.
I have an idea to keep them from seeing us,
he said after an eternity.
It won't be easy, and it will involve fooling Foundry 447's inhibition field. You'll be using weapons well within the forbidden zone, and the station won't allow that.
She ran a hand through her hair and sighed. But why would you help me like this? You're risking yourself and the builder's machines.
Because I care for you, Bellamy Baptista. Because I care.
2 days after attack, mission year 11.
Help me carry her,
Granddad said as they stumbled down the bleach-white halls of the Foundry. Bellamy had her mother under the shoulders. Granddad had her by the feet. Crimson poured from the holes in her back and arms, where the Isoptera had sunk their pincers, seeking sweet nutrients. I'm too little, Bellamy sobbed. She's too heavy. They should have known the radiation wouldn't kill them all. It had only taken 2 of those creatures to escape and make trouble. She'd killed them in the end, with her pipe and her bare hands. But it was too late. Her mom and Granddad were mortally wounded.
I know it's hard, Squirt, but you can do it. Foundry! Where exactly is that door you promised?
A blue light appeared on the floor, leading them down the hall and to the left. They fell into another colorless room, the body of Bellamy's mother coming to rest beside a basin of brackish water. Where am I? Grace croaked. What's going on? Her speech was slow and slurred. She only had a few more breaths before her brain began to shut down. Granddad groaned as he dumped her into the bath.
In with you, if you know what's best.
Don't tell me what to do, Paul.
Bah!
Belle, are you here? Grace reached a muck-covered hand outward, and her daughter took it. He's trying to be all noble now. But you know what kind of man your granddad really is?
Grace Ann,
Granddad mumbled, but then started to cough. He drew back a fist and saw that it was covered in blood.
Oh, hell.
Belle, my sweet daughter, I want you to know that your granddad is not just a liar, but an evil, sadistic creature. She sucked in a series of short breaths, paused, and collected herself. When I was young, he'd come home from the program, and what do you think he did with his evenings?
He drank till he couldn't see straight. He'd take off his clothes. Do you know what that haunted look was in your grandmother's eyes? Do you remember it? I do. I still see it in my mirror.
Bellamy's mouth fell open. What? Mom? What are you telling me? I know things haven't always been easy, but... Her mother's eyes began to glass over.
He would slap her across the face with the back of his hand. He said it would teach her a lesson or two. Maybe next time she'd mind better.
She shivered.
Whenever things didn't go the way he wanted, she was the one to suffer.
Granddad lowered his head and let his daughter say her piece. It was hard to tell if it was blood loss or disappointment that knocked the wind out of him. His body sagged like an empty balloon. The resurrection bath began to glow around Grace. The liquid within it bubbled and frothed. Something mechanical began to whir. Bellamy released her mom's hand. You're lying, Mom. Granddad would never do that. Never! No, I won't believe that.
Make no doubt. He put your grandmother in an early grave. She'd still be with us, if not for him and his abuse. But she loved him. She was a good woman, faithful, never left his side. I made my mistakes, sweetie,
Grandpa said, speaking in his own defense.
More than most, I suppose. I'm sorry for what I was. I did a lot of growing up. Oh, isn't that damned convenient? Did a whole lot of growing up after it didn't matter anymore. I needed a father. I needed a man I could look up to, not an angry tyrant.
She forced out each word, making Bellamy wince with the show of exertion. The energy within the resurrection bath redoubled. Granddad, quickly! The Foundry said it could take the two of you. He shook his head.
No. This is a trip for Grace Anna alone. Coward!
Bellamy's mother spat. It was all too much to take. Bellamy had lost her friends, her home, her dreams, and family in less than a day. And instead of going to her grave or the great beyond with her daughter believing that the only man left in her life was a good one, Grace had to go and poison that as well. I hate you, Bellamy spat. Her mom's eyes went wide, and she mouthed something, but before her lips made noise, her body slipped beneath the surface of the liquid. The room was suddenly washed in a light so bright it drove all other thoughts out of existence. All that remained was a limp body drained away with lingering black bathwater. Bellamy turned to face her granddad, horror replacing every emotion she'd ever known. Why didn't you go with her? She held her tears for a better moment.
Because I'm a coward,
he said, fumbling for the gold-plated gallium disc in his jacket.
I can't face who I was. Least I can do is make up for it.
He set the pulsar map on the floor and slid it towards her.
If you like, you can use this to get home. It's similar to what they put on the Voyager probe. Earth is there, at the center of the lines. Your ship will know what to do.
She ignored the disc. Was Mom telling the truth? He coughed and averted his gaze.
Sorry, Squirt. Y'all deserve better than me.
His eyes fell shut, and his chest ceased moving. Bellamy fell to her knees. She was alone. present. Proxy proved to be more valuable than Bellamy ever suspected. He had given her a plan that just might work. Bellamy slowed her velocity, reducing it from a hair under light speed as she entered Foundry 447's system. She narrowed the torches of her drive to thin beams of plasma cutting at oblique angles, instead of giving the Isoptera a target as bright as a star that swelled as it approached. Only a few photons might reach them. Their early warning systems should filter it out as cosmic noise, nothing more. She slipped to within 1 light hour of the Foundry, still traveling at 10% of light speed. The revelation would have taken months to shave such a velocity to near zero, but not this new body. It was time to see what it could really do.
"Are you ready, Belle?"
Proxy asked, his ears twitching. She nodded. "I am."
"This will not be comfortable. Even with the star sphere's capacity to protect you under high G maneuvers, this will be pushing not only the craft, but your body, and the limits of sane judgment."
"I understand." She gritted her teeth. "How long will I be unconscious?"
"A few minutes."
"How long will we have to attack?"
"Seconds."
She laid a hand on Proxy's head and scratched behind his ear. "What will happen to you?" He leaned into her.
"I don't know. The forces may be too much for... Look, the location of the resurrection bath is on your network. They do not know where it is yet. It is still your choice."
"Thank you, Proxy." He grinned and twisted his head, ears twitching.
"Just a few more scratches behind the ear, and I'll be okay."
She obliged. The antimatter reaction within Bellamy's belly was a swarm of butterflies. Her freefall into Foundry 447's system was arrested with a silent roar of venting plasma. Without the star sphere, Bellamy could survive no more than 5 or 6 Gs of sustained acceleration. Within it, 30 Gs became a comfortable place for her to reside, no more uncomfortable than riding teacups at the fair. She watched the meter in her heads-up display as it went from 30 to 40 to 50. It became hard for her to think, hard to breathe. She focused on something else. Her subjective frame of reference was slowed so that the 12 hours passed in minutes. 90 Gs. 100. Darkness crept in from the corner of her eyes. 110. 100. She awoke in a haze within the tank of water and not her virtual environment. The ship was quiet, tiny bubbles flowing from the edges of her mouthpiece to the aperture of the sphere. "Proxy?" she called. "Proxy!" No response. She closed her eyes and focused. She knew that her window of opportunity was fast approaching. She was within the Foundry's blind spot and falling towards the planet, inside the inhibition field that disabled weapons of builders make. Her virtual interface reinitialized and she found herself back in control. She called for the weapon systems and let out a breath as they came to life, responding with nominal readouts and munition counts. Dozens of enemy interdictors filled the space before her, but couldn't fire their weapons. The Foundry was at her back, and she was facing outward. "Let's see if you like this!" Bellamy released a volley of antimatter slugs while throwing herself to the side. The Isoptera's ship scattered, but not quick enough. Light blossomed from the 1,000-kilometer detonation zones, vaporizing anything within. Bellamy released swarms of drones at the survivors and cut a new trajectory parallel to the Foundry's ring. As the drones held off the most distant of the enemy ships, one interdictor closed in on her. Unable to fire its weapons this close to the builder's structure, it cut down her port side with an atmospheric rib jutting from its outer hull. She banked before it had done more than leave a gash, then dove closer to the Foundry, threading herself through its kilometer-high communication spars. She spun, readying her energy weapons.
"You're not responding,"
Bellamy growled. She could feel the inhibition field at work. The window of open attack was closed. She increased her synaptic response to formulate a plan. Time came to a standstill. There were 2 options laid out before her. Cut and run. Get far enough away from the station that she had the full range of weapons use. There was a good chance she'd be overrun by the Isoptera, but her chances were better than playing a game of hide-and-seek around the ring. Or she could make a break for the resurrection bath, dock with the station, and take weapons from the armory. The Foundry would keep them from attacking her ship while she went for her mother. But it would do nothing to keep her from being overrun by termites. They were eusocial, hive-minded. This was a bad idea. She couldn't do this alone. A timed message blinked in her HUD. "I left something in the trunk," she mouthed. She blinked and checked the rear airlock. Proxy had indeed left her a little gift, and it was already powering up. Unable to tell what the weapon's yield might be, she erred on the side of caution and pointed herself at the northern pole of Foundry 447's gas giant. Unlike the planet the other station surrounded, this one was blue and purple, made of ice, ammonia, and methane. The interdictor followed. As soon as they were free of the inhibition field's first layer, it began to pepper her path with plasma canisters. Searing pain ran down the right side of her body. Pressure leaked into vacuum. She tumbled and found it impossible to keep proper orientation in relation to the planet. The spewing air acted like an out-of-control thruster. Her sensors screamed as the ships who were previously occupied by her drone screen made quick work and closed in. The pole of the blue gas giant drew near. Bellamy spun and twisted, a bird whose wings were suddenly clipped, tumbling to the ground through misty cloud cover. "I have to do something," she gasped. In moments, the gravity of the planet would swallow her for good. She reached out her right hand on instinct and smoothed it down her side. A weave of nanomachines oozed from the edges of the hull and began placing a suture over the wound. She sucked in a breath, and the leaking air was drawn back into storage tanks. The interior of the ship was in vacuum but for her. The star sphere kept her under pressure, safe. Her attitude control returned, and she unleashed a volley of energy weapons. The interdictors raised reflective shields, sending the beams bending harmlessly away from the planet into open space. With the nanomachines repairing the ship, she had no more energy to try that again. The enemy closed on her rear and began tearing holes in her backside. While they might have worked well as a hive mind in close quarters, in space combat they were disjointed, directionless. One of the interdictors attempted to reach out a docking arm and board Bellamy. She rolled before they could make a good connection, nearly slamming into another. A burst of thrust pushed her ahead by several hundred kilometers, but they matched her speed and tried again. Proxy, I hope you knew what you're doing." The rear airlock fell open, and the weapon tumbled out. It glittered in the night with prismatic brilliance as the star's rays found its translucent lattice. Pressure built around the crystal until it could take no more. The structure collapsed. Before the interdictors could pull away, energy poured in all directions from the collapsing lattice, but for a narrow cone in the front. Piezoelectric lances shot through vacuum, disabling each of the interdictors in turn. Fusion reactions ceased. Weapons went cold. Though it might not have destroyed the ships, if they didn't get their power back online soon, they'd fall into the gravity well of the gas giant, crushed in an instant. "Thank you, Proxy," Bellamy muttered, and headed for the proper dock. Her virtual environment faded. The umbilicals retracted, and she swam out of the tank. The ship was under pressure once again, safe to enter, but she found walking a foreign idea that only made sense in another life. She stumbled through the airlock and down the white hallways, stopping every few feet to catch her breath. A trail of water followed her path. A room opened up, and a naked woman sat in a makeshift chair, with packets of food and a cup beside her. She turned. "Bellamy, is that you?" "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Bellamy held her mother's face in her hands, then threw her arms around her. Her mother was thinner than she remembered, her eyes sunken and cold. But she was alive. "I didn't mean it. I'm so sorry." "Mean what, Belle?" Her mother grinned and ran a hand down her face, caressing the cracks and creases of Bellamy's scars. It had taken all this for Bellamy to realize that though she wore her scars on her face, her mother's heart was crosshatched by a multitude of wrongs. The muscles around her scar tissue twitched and her lip quivered. "Mom, what I said, it was in anger." "I know, and I'm sorry too. Can you ever forgive me? I've been a bad mother. My anger consumed me for too long. I treated it more like a friend than an enemy." "Bad mother? No, you haven't been a bad mother. But we all do bad things." Her mother nodded and pulled her close once more. "I suppose we all deserve some forgiveness. Maybe someday we'll find it." "Maybe someday."
Bellamy's story may be at a close for a time, but other adventures await. Visit jfitzpatrickmauldin.com to pick up a copy of Final Solution, a near-future hard sci-fi thriller that will keep you guessing to the very end. This has been Chasing the Signal, written by J Fitzpatrick Mauldin, narrated by J.D. Ledford. Copyright 2018 by J Fitzpatrick Mauldin. Production copyright 2018 by J Fitzpatrick Mauldin.